Hi, I'm Charlie Love and welcome to this admin tutorial with AppsEvents and Acer. So today is going to be all about AppsScripts and Google Forms and Google Sheets, and about how you can provide a tool that allows non-admin users to change passwords. So this is really about the use case for this, for example, would be if you're in a school setting, an education setting where you have teaching staff or lecturing staff who would like the ability to change passwords, but you don't want to provide them with any kind of administrative access to the admin console. So in that use case, what you can do is create a Google form that allows those specific users to submit password changes, and then an app script that processes that and makes those changes. And you can put in place all the security that you'd want around that and include all the logging of those requests so that you can audit them as necessary. So to start this off, I'm going to make a Google form. So I'm just going to pop into Google Drive. In fact, pop in straight away to Forms because that's all I need to do. And I'm going to start with a blank form. And the form I'm going to make here is really just, it's going to just be let's just call it, this is going to be my password reset. And on here, I'll just say this form. And a few things we need to do. Let's say, so we're going to get the username for the password reset. So what I'm doing here is I'm just getting the bit before the @ sign. So I'm not going to ask to type in the rest of the domain that our students are using. I'm just assuming here that all students are on the same domain. If students were on different domains, you could actually just ask the users to type in the whole email address for the student. But in this case, I'm just going to take in just the username. So I'm going to add a little description. So name is the first part of the email address before the @. And that's just going to be a short answer. Let's make that required. And then the next one is I'm just going to say, what's the temporary password? Because all of this will automatically ask for password reset when the user signs in. Good security practice. So we've got that set up. So we're going to get a temporary password for the user. Okay, a couple of things to do with that. Let's also gather the email address of those that are signed in. And we'll just restrict it to the domain. That's all good. And we'll save that. So now what we've got is a form that will gather password change requests. That's all it's doing. So let's look at responses. We haven't got any in yet, but let's just create a spreadsheet to store these responses. And let's call this password change form. Create. Super. I'm just going to pop back here and just on my form, just click there to change the name back to the same title as the form has. That's grand. Good. Okay. So what we're going to have here is this is our spreadsheet. In this sheet, we're going to gather all the information as it comes in. So this is going to be a log of password change requests. So that's where we can get back audit information about who made what request and when to change passwords. Let's go and fire up our AppScript editor and start writing some scripts. So we're just going to pop into Tools and we're going to go to Script Editor. Okay, so let's give it a name. Password change. And let's start typing in some info. So let's get the information from the form to start with. So let's call that get info. And just so that we know what we're doing, let's set up the access to the sheet. So to get that, we're just going to start a new variable called sheet, and that's going to use the spreadsheet app, and we're going to get active sheet. Cool. So then we need to read the data off that sheet. So let's have a variable called data. It's going to get a data range. So let's just get everything. Get values. Cool. And what we want here, the next thing is we just want to get the, let's go to just add a comment in there for that. Read the data from the sheet. And what we want to do is let's get the last row, because the last row will hold the data that's just been submitted, right? So get last row of data. And what that'll be is, well, let's call it recent entry. And that's going to be sheet. Oh, no, not. I want this, get last row, and it's actually going to be the last row minus 1 because an entry's come in and then it's jumped onto the next row. So we want the row above. So that's what we want to do. So what we want to do next is from that data, we want to find out the email address of who submitted the form. So that, remember, we're logging in the form, we're logging the email. This email address is the person who submitted it. This will hold the username for the student, in this case, whose password is being reset, and this is going to hold their temporary password. Okay. So what we'll do now is let's just get the current user. So we'll say for our current user, data recent entry, and so that's the recent entry is the variable above, and then it's an array. So if you know about arrays, this will be array position 0, position 1, 2, 3. So in this case, this is going to be position 1. And I just want to read it and just make sure that it's been tidied up, that we're taking out any characters that we don't want. So I'm just going to do a little bit of housekeeping on it. Replace unwanted characters and trim it down just in case. So that'll tell us the current user. And do a bit of housekeeping in terms of just removing any additional characters and things that we don't want for the string. And then let's read the username that's been submitted. So this is the username for the student. So let's do that. Let's call that one reset user, because that's the password we're going to reset. And from our data, again, we'll just use that recent entry, and this time it's going to be position number 2 in that array. And I'm going to add in my domain. So the domain I'm doing this on, the domain the students are using is at demoworkspaceedu.com. So that's my domain. And what we'll do is once we've got the 2 values there, we'll join them together in just a minute, and we'll make them all lowercase and just check them that way. So let's now get that temporary password. So again, the same thing. We're going to read from the data, recent entry, and of course this time it's position number 1, 2, 3. Okay. Now, just for, I suppose, just to be certain, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just make sure that the user's been typed in lowercase. I'm just going to use the reset to lower case option there. And I'm going to just, in case when you, because if you're using this script, I'm okay because I've typed in domain in lowercase, but if someone's editing it and they types in the domain in uppercase, just to be sure, I'll put that in lowercase as well. So I'll just put this domain into lowercase as well, just to make that there. Okay, and because these are a couple of new variables, I'll need to make sure that I use var, just to make sure that's correct. Okay, and then what I'll do is the email address for the student, in this case, the person whose email, their email address is being used to reset their password. For this is now going to be joining the two together. So I'm going to go lowercase user and then join that to lowercase domain. Cool. And then finally, what I want to do is, just because I want to keep a track of this, particularly if I'm going to debug it later, I may want to just check that the information that's going in here is valid. So I just want to check if I'm running through the logs inside when I'm debugging this script. It'd be useful to get this output from it. So I just want to check what the email address is that we're going to use to reset. So I'm going to do that. So that will help me just track what's going on. And then now that I've got the information that I need, I've got the username, I've got the temporary password, and I've got the user, the teacher or the member staff or whoever it is who's changing the password. I've got those 3 key bits of information. I'm now going to write another function just to change that password. So, and in there we're going to pop in email, temporary password, and current user. So that's my first bit. That's a getting the information part. So now I'm going to have another further function where we're going to reset the user password. And in here, we're just going to have, it's going to be a call that's going to have in those values. So we're going to have email, and then I'm going to have the temporary password, and we'll also add in the current user. Current user. Okay. So in here, what we're going to do is check. I think first of all, we need to do a bit of checking. So we need to check that the user who's making the change is allowed to make the change for that student. So in this case, so how is our domain set up? How are organizational units set up so that we can recognize which OUs have power over which other OUs for this password change form? So if I think about my domain here, I'm just going to go into admin and show you what I mean. So I've got an organizational unit called school demo, and inside school demo, I have 2 OUs. I have teachers and I have students. So these teachers will be able to change, to anyone in this OU, teachers, is going to be able to change a password for anyone in this student's OU. That's how it's going to work. So anyone here can change a password for anyone here. So that's just handy to know, see the context for it. So we're going to use the organizational unit path. We're going to read that in from the admin directory. We're going to parse that to identify that it's the correct OU path that we're using. And then we're going to say whether or not the user can change the password for that particular other user, student in this case. Okay, so back to our script. And the first thing we're going to do is I'm just going to use, I'm going to write another function in a second called valid user change. And that's going to say let's say get valid user change. And in there, I'm just going to put email and current user. Okay. So remember, email is the email address of the student. Current user is the email address of the person making the change. Okay, grand. So that, let's write a little function for that. And I'm just going to pop in here, current user. So what is this going to do? So this, this function allow us to read the directory for the user's organizational path, get it for both of them, parse the paths, and then work out if they're allowed to, one's allowed to change the password for the other. So let's do email user path, and let's do get. Let's make another one called. Let's make another function called get user path, email. Okay, cool. So let's have a look at what get user path is going to do. So this is the same function. I'm going to write one function here to get the user path for all users. So in this, very straightforward, really. I'm just going to have and then we're going to try to read the directory. So we're going to say var user equals, and this is the user object that we get back from the admin directory. So admin directory dot users dot get, and then we're going to say user email. So what I'll do is look up the admin directory based on that user's particular email address, and then I'm going to get a var return value. So I'm going to return the value user and org unit path. So that's the organizational unit path for that particular user. Now, if that fails, then the user doesn't exist, right? So we're going to catch the error. So if there's an error, we'll catch that error and we'll say var return value equals, I'm just going to write error in big text. I'm going to use that later because what I'm going to do is work out look at my messages, my return values, and if they've got error at the front of them, I know there's a problem. So does not exist. Cool. And then when I've done all of that, it's either worked or it hasn't, but I've captured, if it's failed, I've caught it. And then we're going to return value. Brilliant. So that, all that little code there does is it goes away, it takes the email address that's been submitted, it reads the admin directory, it grabs the organizational unit path, or detects an error if it happens, and then returns that back to the script rather. Cool. All right, so now that we have the organizational unit path here for the email, remember email is the user who is password we are changing. What we want to do is just detect that error. So I'm going to see if it's failed, then there's not much point proceeding to do anything, is there? So if I've got my email user path, which is the variable that comes back in. So if email user path, so we want to do, let's just check for that characters, there's error characters at the beginning of it. So let's check those and say, right, if that's not equal to error. So that's the neat way of catching the error here. I quite like that. So if it's not an error, let's go into the next bit. So next bit we probably want to do is we need to look at the path to check what that path is going to be. So just to work out, is it a student or not? Okay. So let's just look at that path. So this is going to be a comment. And then what we're going to do is say var email user path vars. So I'm going to just use this to hold the array that I'm going to make. And how am I going to make that array? Well, I'm going to take my user path. And if you know about user paths, they are delimited by slashes. So if I split that user path up, I can make an array from it if I split it up by the slash. So I'll end up with my user path split up into an array that I can reference. So I can reference the first part of it, or the second part of it, or the third part of it, depending how many parts there are in it. So in this case, this is going to, I'm really using, if you look at the admin directory right here, what I'm doing is I'm saying, right, so if I look at the path, and if it's, so it's demo school, and inside demo school, if it's the teachers, so the path is demo school / teachers, if that's the path, then teachers is the role, that's the role of the person. That's what we're saying from that organizational unit. So I'm going to just record that as a kind of role here. So I'm going to say email user role equals user path vars, and it's going to be 2 because I've got the empty array. I've got my array will break down into a slash, then I'll have my demo school, and then I'm going to have my teachers part. Okay, so that's what will be in the array. There'll be 3 elements to it, 0, 1, 2. So I need to get the second, the one that's in position 2. Okay, so that's great. So now that's me got now the role for the person whose password we are changing. Okay, grand. So next thing I want to do, so that's the password we are changing. We've got their information. And let's get the information about the person making the change. So, yeah. So this will be the one for students, and then this one, next one we're going to do is the one for the teacher. Okay. So let me just do this. So we're going to get a new current, let's do the same thing again. So current user path equals what did I call that? What did I call that? Yeah, I called it email user path. Yeah. So I want email user path, and this time it's going to be current user is what we pass into it. Now, because the person submitting the form has to exist in the domain, I'm not going to check if they don't exist. So I'm not going to do the same validation that I did on the email address for the person whose password we're changing. All right? Because there's no need, because I know that they exist. So I can just proceed to read the path and get the role information that I want. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to just get that information. So I'm going to do the var current user path. I'm going to add vars to this just as I did above. So this is, again, it's just my current user. That's what I want to do. Oh, that should be var because I haven't added var there. That's why I didn't come up with the autocomplete. Now it comes up. Var current user path, and this time this is me going to split it up. So I'm going to just do split and split it again. Ooh. Split it on this. Cool. And again, what I'll get is, in this case, because of the way I'm setting up my script and setting up my paths, I'm going to get my path back. And then what we want to do is, this is the current user role. So that current user role is going to be the current path vars. And again, it's going to be 2. So that's what we'll have, because it's going to be top level domain, the school, and then it's the role that we're going to have. And that's how our OUs are set up. So we've got our top level domain, then our school, and then these OUs that we've got set up. Excellent. Okay. So that's good. Good so far. So basically what we want to do next is, right, say, are you allowed to change a password, right? So if the current role, so this is the person making the change. If the person making the change is, if their role is equal to teachers. Now this is not their administrative role or anything else. This is the role that I'm making from this OU here. So if it's teachers, if they're in teachers, then, okay, so if they're in teachers, then let's check if the person who's used password, their username, password they're trying to change is in pupils, it's not pupils, students. Okay, so if email user role equals students, cool. So if it's students, we're going to return, again, I like my 5 characters at the beginning, so I'm just going to say valid, password change can proceed. Cool, that's good, good news. But I'm going to capture the error. So the errors will be when the teacher user who's logged in at the form is trying to change somebody else's password who's not a student. So in that case, we want to say there's an error. So we're going to return an error. You are not authorized to change passwords for this user. Cool. And we can log these errors as we go. So that's fine. But what if they weren't a teacher? So if they weren't in the teachers one, we want to return an error for that too. So in that case, if they're not a teacher, we want again another error. And you are not authorized to change passwords because they're not. So let's just check how that looks. I've got an extra curly bracket there, but that's okay. I'll take that out. Or do I? No, that's fine. That's all fine. That's all correct. Good. So now that we've got that set up, we're returning here. So that's the function done. So that one's done. So now we know if you're allowed to change a password or not. Now that we know that, the next thing we're going to do is go ahead and make that password change. So let's pop back up here. We know that we've got a string back that tells us whether or not it's a valid user change. So I do like my little errors at the beginning because I do like to check for those to see if there's been a change. So I'm just going to do that here. I'm just going to say valid user change dot substring. It's that 0 to 5. And let's just say if it's not equal to error, that's good news, right? Not equal to error. If it's not equal to error, let's go change a password. Exciting. So let's try. And this is our var user. So we're using that user object again from the admin admin directory. and we're going to get based on email. And remember, email is the email address of the user that we're trying to change. So good. Okay. So we're going to get that email. Let's just check that looks okay, apart from I've got an extra bracket. So I'm going to log that I've started this. I just want to keep an eye on this in the log for AppsScript, just to so I've got a valid email address, and now I'm going to so I know I've got a valid email address because it's now, I've done the call and it's working. It hasn't thrown an error. So I'm going to change password. So I'm going to say change password at next login. Now I put in the wrong bracket there. That's what I did. That should be there. Okay, that looks a bit better. So now it's try curly bracket, and there'll be another curly bracket there when I've finished it. So let's just try that again. User now. So what's happened there is now I'm getting now it's going to work for me. So now user. So change password at next login. Change password at next login. That looks correct. Equals true. I'm going to force that password change, and then I'm going to have user password equals whatever the temporary password is we've got. Exciting this, isn't it? Then we're going to do the admin directory dot users dot update user email. So what that's going to do is, just to talk it through, we've read the user object for this email address, the person whose email address we're trying to change, the student in this case. We've logged it, it's valid because it hasn't failed and thrown an error, so we know that it's a real user. We're amending the user object to say that the next change password at next login is true, to force it. We're amending the password to the temporary password, and then we're writing the user object back to that email address through the user update. So that's what we're doing. And then now that we've done that, probably best to log that we've done it successfully. So let's just log that in. Okay. So we've done that. So that looks good. But, right, so what happens if we read the directory and the user's not actually there? Some sort of error. So let's just catch the error. So we'll just say in here, logger.log user is not a valid email address, which could be, but hopefully not. And then logger.log invalid account. Okay, grand. So that's the first part. Now, so that should successfully change the password, but what happens if we come back with an error from the last part where it's not a valid change to be allowed? So again, I'll just want to log that. So I'm just going to try to log that through. So just say log this in and invalid account change. So this is coming back where we're saying the errors are down here. So we're saying either of these two errors here. It's an invalid account change because you're not allowed to do it. I'm just going to log that is the case. Account bank is an invalid account change for the current user. Remember, the current user is who's signed in and completed the form. For this reason. And then what I'm going to do is just add in the string that we got from the user account change, the string that came back. So that's my attempt to catch the error. Now, if that fails, don't want to do that. If that fails, I'm just going to catch the error. Now, it shouldn't fail doing the log, but I'm just going to be sure. So I'll say it's not a valid email address. Cool. So that's that part now. So what we've got, it's exciting stuff, is we're going to get the information from the spreadsheet. We're then going to check if it's a valid change. Down here we check with the OUs, and we're saying that anyone who's their OU folder has teacher in that second position in the array. So that's whoever is in here. Teachers can change passwords for students. So students, teachers. So we're saying that if it's teachers, then they can change the passwords for students. That's all good. And we're using this function here to read the organizational unit path part and send it back, or send back an error if necessary. So that's it. Now, in order to make all this work, we need the magic of Google's APIs. So we just need to add some services in here. So we're going to need the admin SDK. Absolutely, we're going to need to add that in. And we're also going to need, because we're reading from writing to Google Sheets, we're also going to need to add in Google Sheets API. So let's add these in as well. So that's really cool. We've got those available to us. So to get some data into this form, I've switched across to my teacher account. This is the one that sits inside the teacher's OU that I showed you earlier. So I'm just going to reset a password for a student. So I'm just going to do student. So I've got a user called a student, and let's just do password change to what? Red bus. Green 17 red bus. So that's going to be a temporary password, and let's submit that. Right, so I've switched back now to my sheet, and you can see the entry in the sheet here. So that's all good. So I want to, just for the purposes of testing this, let's go and run our script now and see how this works out. Now, the first time you run your script, you're going to have to authorize the various APIs. So we're going to review those permissions. And it's going to have to be able to do these things. So I'm just going to say allow, run the script. So password change. I had a couple little bugs in my script that I've just debugged, and I'll post the completed script here with the video so that you can check it out. I'd done a couple of things, like I hadn't named a couple of my functions correctly. Just a couple of little errors there as I've been typing it out. A couple of debugs that I just did. So there's 2 or 3 of those that I've just fixed. So we've got the full and working script here. So what it will do, it goes in, it looks at the logs the student's address, and changes the password for us. That's great. So that's good. Let's give it something else just to check. Let's just check if I fill this up. It's going to fail because I'm not, my main user I'm using here isn't in that OU. So I'm just going to do, I'm going to try to change the password for a student this time. Temporary password, submit that form. And now I'm going to run, just open up the script again. So let me try and run it. And this time it should fail. Yeah, it's an invalid account change because I'm not allowed to change the password for the students. So I'm not in that place. So that works fine. And let me just run it again. This time I'm going to get my teacher account. So let's go to my teacher account. And this time I'm going to change it for another user. I'll change it for a user that I know is Ben and submit that. So that information's come into my spreadsheet. Now I know Ben is not in that OU. So yeah, let's try this now and let's run it again. And this time it fails because I don't have, the teacher user doesn't have permission to change it for that other user in the domain. So all of our use case tests work, but it's a real pain, the fact that our script isn't running at the moment when the form's submitted. So let's fix that. So we're going to set a trigger just to finish this off. We're going to say add the trigger, and what we're going to do is on the form submit, we're going to get info, and get info sets up and triggers this. So I'm just going to save that. I'm going to authorize it because now it's running every time we trigger that. Awesome. So now if I go and submit a response, so let's try one of our failed ones again. So this try, I'll try doing Ben again. I can go back into here, into my executions. I can see that this was just triggered just now here. So that's an invalid account. So I've got my teacher account here. I'm going to do a student as my teacher. That's what I'm going to change. Password, submit. Go back to my executions. This is my new execution. Script's just been running. And the change was successful. So that's great. That's working. So that's how to implement a script and a form that will allow particular users and OUs to change the passwords for users and other OUs. Thank you for watching this Chrome admin demo from AppsEvents and Acer. I'm Charlie Love. Thank you.